All right, what is up, my peeps? Joshua Smith here with another GSD Mode podcast leveling up episode. And today I'm here to discuss and break down on how to continue pushing, how to continue executing when you are going through a shitstorm, when you are going through a difficult, challenging time, when you are failing, how to go out there and continue executing at a high level so you can turn your situation around. You know, one of the most important elements on our leveling up success journeys is to be able to continue to push through when you are going through hell, when you're going through, again, this shitstorm, when you're going through a challenging time, when you're going through a problematic time, however you want to define it, when you are going through hell, right? One of the things that will define our overall success and who we are is our ability to continue to get shit done, continuing to execute, continuing to show up, even during these difficult times, right? It's one of these things. It's really the only way that we're going to turn our situation around. And then also, these painful moments that we experience can become the greatest learning lessons of our overall journey. You know, the adversity that we overcome, the adversity that we experience, the adversity that we overcome, if we allow it to do so, can allow us to become better, stronger, and more successful by going through those learning lessons and so forth, right? So the first thing is understanding that God does not reserve problems just for a select few. We are all going to experience certain problems, whether that be in business, whether it be in your personal life, or a combination of both. We are all going to go through these shitstorms, these problematic times, however you want to define that there. We are all going to experience them. And a lot of times the problems are the same. You know, now I'm not going to sit there and say there's not going to be unique problems to your, unique situation, your personal life, your business life. But look, we all experience growth pains. We all experience slow pains. We all experience loss. We all experience, people, doing bad things to us, whether it be business, personal life, so from a high kind of macro level, a lot of the problems that we all experience are the same. And so often we can feel, especially when you're going through this, so often you can feel, as a loser, you can feel that you're defeated, you can feel like a failure, you can feel all these things, which I have felt those things so many times, right? But we can feel like we're an island by ourselves, that we are the only ones to experience these, something's wrong with us, but then you quickly find and discover and that almost everybody else experiences either those same exact problems or something, very, very similar, to those problems and situations. And one of the things that I always go back to, and now these are words from Napoleon Hill, author Think and Grow Rich, Outwitting the Devil. He's wrote so many other amazing books, but my two favorite of his are Think and Grow Rich and Outwitting the Devil. He looked at failure, had a different way of looking at it. He looked at failure as it's only a failure unless you throw in the towel and you quit. What most people deem to be a failure. So like, okay, I'm failing at this thing. I'm struggling with this thing. I'm having this problem with this thing. He looked at that as a temporary defeat. And his words were this, and he had a lot of words, obviously, with all the books that he wrote, but what the words I'm speaking to specifically right now that I'm always going back to and playing back in my head, especially when I'm experiencing a difficult time, this is something I'm playing through my head multiple times throughout the day, is that your success is in direct proportion to the amount of temporary defeats that you experience. So he replaced that word failure with a temporary defeat, because again, it's only a failure if you throw in the towel, if you quit, if you give up on your goals, dreams, and visions, that's when it becomes a failure. He looked at these challenging times as temporary defeats. But back to that saying, your level of success that you achieve will be in direct proportion to the amount of temporary defeats that you experience. So that means that if you want to continue on this leveling up journey, if you want to continue creating more and more success, then that means that you are going to experience more and more of these temporary defeats. And it's so true. And I've discovered this myself in my own, success and leveling up journey, that the more success that you create, the bigger success that you create, the more success that you create, the bigger the problems, the more the struggles, the more the temporary defeats, all of those things hold to be true, right? Like you have bigger business, you have, bigger success, the bigger the success, the bigger the problems. So then from there, we then need to have an effective process. We have to have a strategy of how to allow ourselves to continue pushing through these difficult times, because during these difficult times, man, you could become emotional. It can be, again, it can be very challenging. I've been through a lot of shit, and I've had during those tough times where, look, man, it was hard to look my wife in my eyes, in the eyes, look at my kids. I felt like a loser as a husband, as a father, as a business person. You're depressed, you're down on yourself, your self-talk's really negative. You get into a depressed state, or if you're somebody like me that suffered from depression in the past, it's easy if I don't protect my mind very carefully. It's easy for me to get back into, that slide back into, into depression. So it can be a challenge during these times. So then that way we need to have a process. I'm just going to walk you guys through the 7-step process, that's allowed me to get through, these difficult challenges that I've been through, and throughout my career. And I'm not going to go through all these because I've been through so many different challenges, just as you have, but I'll look at this, because so often we'll sit there, and I used to do this too. I look at, people that achieved, a higher level of success or much more success than I achieved, and I look at them and think that they, I put them on a pedestal. I almost think that their situation was different, that they, maybe had some, DNA, strand that I didn't have, that they were Superman, like that they had, born differently, had something different that I didn't have. I put them on the pedestals. I've learned over the years to not do that, because as I got to know, meet my heroes and, so forth, I realized that wasn't for, the furthest thing from the truth. I mean, they experienced the adversity that I experienced, or different levels of it from different people and different things. But the one commonality is we all experience a lot of shitstorms, a lot of problems, all the things that I mentioned, but like when I first got my real estate license, I had massive struggles there, just like everybody else. I exhausted my last $1,000 to get my license. I plan on getting my license on this specific date, and I just lost my job right before. So I planned on jumping in part-time, but then I lost my job. I'm like, well, I got a couple weeks before my license will be active. It doesn't make sense to get a job now. Well, then I had delays getting my license. I got arrested, not at that time, but years prior. Nothing bad, just being drunk and college age, right after I dropped out of college, and it was a misdemeanor on my record, but I had to get the police reports. I had to go through all this stuff. So I delayed it like another month, so I exhausted all my funds just to get my license, had to go through credit card cash advances until I had commissions coming in. That was a very stressful time for me, thinking of like, well, crap, I'm going to fail this thing before it even begins. Then I had experience about halfway through my career where I lost everything. And it actually was some decisions outside of my real estate business, some investments and other things that I made. But, I lost everything, my entire life savings, lost everything. And then not only did I lose everything, I went below zero. I had to put myself into $100,000 of business credit card debt. And at that time, I also had, 2 car leases at like $2,200 a month of car lease debt. I had about $500,000 in mortgage debt. We had a third child on the way, and being in that position, that was a very scary position. It took me 18 months to get out of that hellhole. I've also had, so those are, some examples of pains from loss of income or struggles with that. But I've also had others, elements of growing pains. Like when I got into REO during 2008, when the market crashed, about 2007, 2008-ish, timeframe here, we had to float all of the banks for cash for keys, for all the repairs that they did for the properties, for all of this stuff. Well, I started growing so fast with new REO accounts and getting so many properties that it only took several months to the point where I had over $250,000 of my own capital floated out to the banks. So yeah, we had a lot of closings come in, we had a lot of commissions coming in, but my money going out, and that was all money that was going to get returned to me eventually. But those growing pains, I had to go months and months and months without a paycheck. Got to the point where I was having to do credit card cash advances, selling other assets just to float myself. I was freaking out that, okay, I was quickly becoming one of the top foreclosure agents in my market. And I was freaking out that I was going to get my own house foreclosed on and be like the laughing stock of the local industry. I've also had, key people quit that caused a lot of, pains in that temporary moment. Or, those of you that run, real estate teams or smaller real estate teams, you get, 3, 4, 5 of, your top agents that get together. They all, split off, decide to go create their own team. You lose 30, 40% of your revenue overnight. Lots of different problems that I've experienced, throughout this. And this is why and how and what's led to this 7-step process I'm going to walk you guys through here today. So let's dive into that. Now, real quick, before we jump into this 7-step process, do me a huge favor. If you happen to be watching this on YouTube, please subscribe, hit that like button. Toss me in a comment that I personally respond to all of those comments. Also, regardless of where you're watching and listening to this, make sure that you guys go check out gsdmode.com. And on there, there's, I got a bunch of free resources, trainings, free things on there. But one thing that I highly recommend that you guys do right now is check out my 3-hour free masterclass taking place on there, because that is all about how to continue to grow and scale your business, regardless of the marketplace itself. So whether it's a boom, bust, crash, anything in between, how to continue to grow and scale your real estate business, regardless of the market itself. And I'm going to show you how I've been able to continue, how during the Great Recession, all of those times, I continue to grow and scale my real estate business, regardless of the market. Our market is shifting and changing very fast right now, and you need to be prepared. You need to be able to adapt and shift. So it's a 3-hour free masterclass, no strings attached, 100% free, breaking down in depth tactical strategic steps for you to take to go out there, adapt and shift, and continue that scale your business during these changing times. I also have my free ebook on there, which are 42 top tips, scripts, strategies, so forth for my business in there. You can also check out, if you're interested in my coaching and mentorship program, if you go to the coaching tab, you can actually schedule a one-on-one, 1 hour long free discovery / coaching call with me. Well, we'll go down, break it down, where your production's at, what your goals are. I'll give you some top tips, so forth. And that also gives me a chance to tell you about my coaching program to see if it's a fit for you. These are zero pressure with those. So you don't have to worry about being high pressured, any of that. Tell you about the program. If it's for you, great. If not, that's okay too. But I always make sure that those calls are of value regardless. So go check those out. All right, now let's jump back on in. And again, it becomes extremely important, you guys, to be able to continue executing, to continue taking action, to continue being able to get shit done when we are going through these difficult times. So let's break down through these 7 different steps here. And I've got 3 pieces of papers here that you guys can't see, but if you see my eyes looking down, that's just because I'm looking down to make sure I'm not missing anything here as I go through these different steps with you. Okay, so number 1 is reflection. And again, I know that this can be tough because we're going through emotional times. So sometimes, like if it just happened, if you just got burned, like you might need to wait 24 hours for this, right? Because one of the things that's really important when it comes to reflection is you got to remove emotions from this. And so we're going to deal in realities. We're going to reflect. We're going to deal in realities. We're going to remove the emotion from this. And we are all CEOs of our own business. We are own CEOs of our own life. So what I want you to do here is to take full responsibility of this situation, even in situations where it was somebody else that maybe fucked you over, that put you in this tough spot. Well, look, you chose to allow that person in your life, even in an extreme situation like embezzlement. So yeah, I mean, that person stole from you. That person, screwed you over XYZ. And I'm not saying that gives them a pass. I'm not saying to forgive them. I'm not saying to not press charges against them. I'm not saying any of those things, right? But in order to grow from this at the highest level, we need to take full responsibility, right? Well, how could I, how could I have, what could I have changed up in my hiring process to ensure that, I had a higher quality person that was in that role? What could I have done from an inspection standpoint, to put, guards in place so that couldn't have taken place, or I could have caught it quicker, whatever that may be, taking full responsibility of all of those things, right? And identifying, okay, well, what exactly happened? What exactly in the business led it to, or your personal life, whatever, what led it to you being in this mess that you are in right now? Right? And go back to, hey, when things were rocking, when things were great, what was happening there? And try to retrace that journey, reverse engineer what took place, what those steps were, what led to from when things were great, if they were great at any key time or whatever, but as much as you possibly can, reflect and go back to and identify and reverse engineer what led to being in this position right now. And again, identify how you are at fault. So then that way we can then, again, we own it, but then we're able to then identify. This becomes really important, right? Because once we identify what got us into this mess in the first place, well, then from there, now we can start putting processes in place to ensure that we don't get there in the future. One mistake before I had a process like this, and what led to this overall process, for me is I get into, these problematic states, whether it be business or my personal life. And I get out of it. And then a year later, 2 years later, I'd be in the same mess again. And I just keep repeating the same bullshit over and over. I'm like, okay, like this obviously isn't working. This is a problem, but what's the one common denominator? Me. Like I'm allowing this thing to continue to take place. Okay. So then from there, now that we've reflected on this will, again, allow us to identify what led to the problem, how it was created in the first place, what we need to avoid it in the future, right? And what we need to do then to avoid it in the future. And here's the thing though, with the past, you guys, and I'll talk about this as we progress here on these steps, but we want to utilize the past. And when I say this, take this with a grain of salt, because this is stuff that works for me. But I believe it'll work powerfully for you as well. But with the past, I want to utilize the past only to learn, to grow, and to reflect from. And the reflection is what allows me to learn and grow from it. And that's it, right? Because so often, if we allow ourselves to live in the past over and over and over, what does that lead to? Well, that leads to negative emotions. That leads to a lot of times self-sabotage. The human being species is like the only species that we continue to beat ourselves up and punish ourselves over and over and over for some bullshit that we did years in the past. It's like, no, man, like fucking, own it, reflect on it, learn from it, grow from it. Own it, do the things that we're talking about here, but then from there, understand that old version of yourself, once you've grown, once you've expanded from this, once you've, again, we've grown, we've metamorphosized, we've become somebody different, that old version of us is dead. Like, I'm not going to think about that damn thing again. There is a reason that the windshield is 20 or 30 or 100 times larger than the rear view mirror, right? I'm just using the rear view mirror to reflect, grow, and expand. And then I'm focused at that windshield, right? Like, I'm focused on like moving forward. I'm going to use it to reflect, grow, expand. And that's it, right? So don't allow yourself to stay in the past, right? So we're going to do this, and then boom, then we're going to move on. Okay, so step number 2 then is to get clarity on what it is that you want, or regain clarity on what it is that you want most. Because again, during these times of defeat, during these times of, whatever you want to call these, the problems that we were going through, it can be easy to get down on ourselves, to lose excitement for the future, and so forth. So get clarity on what you want it, why it's important to you. And if you've had clarity on those things, regain that clarity. So then now you know exactly where it is that you want to be, where it is that you want to go. And of course, during these times, we want to get out of the mess that we're in, right? But then from there, once you're out of that mess on where you're at, then, still having that full clarity on where it is that we want to go, where we want to be in the next 12 months, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, like what's our long-term vision, and so forth, because that will help reinvigorate ourselves, gives us hope for the future, and so forth. Okay, so then, and this leads us to step number 3. Now that you have clarity on what you want, why you want it, why it's important to you, and then now that we've done the reflection process, this allows us now to create a plan and a strategy to get from our current situation to where it is that we want to go. And look, you got to sometimes break these down in baby steps, so I'm going to create an overall plan from, where I'm at to where I want to go. But it's like, okay, like maybe you're in a bunch of debt. You got yourself, like when I got myself on $100,000 of credit card debt. Yeah, I still had my future goals of making, a shit ton of money and growing these big businesses and so forth, but phase 1 of that future plan was to get myself out of this debt. If I want to be making, $1 million a year, or let's just say, $100,000 a month, well, first, like if I'm at 0, well, I might need to get to making 10 grand a month. Then I might need to get to making 20 grand a month. Then I might need to get to, it's like when I have a brand new agent on my team, maybe they want to be closing 4 deals a month. I will sit there and say, okay, well, let's get you built up where you're closing at least 1 deal a month, and then let's build you up to, then closing 2 deals a month and 3 deals a month. But let's start popping, let's, we're taking kind of baby steps, right? We're crawling before we walk, then we're walking before we run, and so forth with this. So step number 3 is create a plan and strategy, get from where you're currently at to where it is that you want to be. Okay, so then step number 4, and this becomes really, really important, you guys, when it comes to overall execution. So this is making sure that you are focusing on living in the now, in the present. And I'm not saying this from like a spiritual kind of hippie, like, oh, you got to operate in the present, but let's break this down, right? Execution happens in the present. Execution happens in the now. We talked about this a moment ago, but if you're spending too much time in the past, and if you're in the past longer than to just allow yourself to reflect, to learn, to grow from this, right? So in that, when we live in the past beyond that, that then leads to those, there's a saying out there that past, living in the past leads to depression and create, not just depression, but, guilt, right? So living in the past creates guilt, living in the future creates anxiety, with that. So, and I don't know for sure for that to be true, but it sounds, decently accurate, right? So anyway, though, if I live in the past too much, that's going to create those negative emotions, potentially lead to self-sabotage, which puts us on this like spiral loop, which just does not serve us, doesn't support us, doesn't do anything good for us. Well, then if we live in the future too much, right? Then if we live in the future, that just puts us into a daydream state. That gets us into, dreaming, wishing, hoping, then we start wishing things were different. And we start, right? Shit gets done in the now. And especially during problem times, it becomes absolutely key to execute. And it's always important to execute. But when you are in the shit, of like when you're in the middle of these shit storms, it's even that much more crucial to be able to execute. So as much as you possibly can, focusing on the now, focusing on the execution. So, for me, and I've tried to now, and this was initially, grown from going through and getting through these problematic times. But this is something that I try to do now each and every day. And when I say try to, most of the time I'm good at executing on it, but I'm human. I have off days with this, but as much as I possibly can, I try to live in 16-hour increments. So let's just say I'm, sleeping 7-8 hours of this. Okay. That gives me 16 to 17 hours of execution that day. And I'm just hyper focused on execution throughout that day, right? And when we're living in the now and within that execution, so like in these 16, 17-hour blocks, if you will, that allows us to, again, be hyper focused on, is everything that I'm doing get me one step closer to get to turning around my situation? We need to be focused on this as much as possible, especially, and why I keep saying especially during these shitstorm times, because during these times we're hyper emotional, right? We got a lot of things on our mind. It can be so difficult to think clearly during these times, so it becomes that much more important, so we then are focusing day by day, each and every day. And again, I'm not saying to not have your future goals planned out. We've already talked about that. Once those goals are planned out, well, now I got to be, hyper focused on milking as much as I possibly can out of each and every fucking damn day to execute at the highest possible level to get my situation turned around. Okay, so step number 5 is to seek the help that you need to seek during these times. I used to believe that strength was never showing weakness. And then very quickly during my leveling up and my own personal leveling up and success journeys, I realized that true strength is to be vulnerable enough to allow ourselves to identify when and where we are weak, and then going out there and getting the necessary help that we need. So during these times, man, you're not going to have all the answers. And it may not just be that you don't have all the answers. A lot of times we don't have all the answers, but maybe you had the answers, or when you weren't during, in a time like this, because again, as I mentioned earlier, we're emotional. It's hard to think clearly, and so forth. So this is really like when I'm going through these hard times, this is where I'll really lean on my mentors, friends, people that I know. But here's the key with this. As you are seeking help, not only is it key to go out there and seek the help that you need. And I'm not saying that it necessarily takes a coach. It might take a coach. Sometimes help can be through books. It can be through podcasts. It can be through YouTube videos. It can be through conversations with friends. It can be, and there's multitudes of ways to go out there and get help, right? But identifying, okay, how do we need that help? What does this look like? From there. Then when you are seeking that help, though, it becomes really important to not go out there and seek help from enablers. And what I mean by this is, yeah, you got close friends, you got close family that might hear of your situation and just be like, oh, it's okay. You're going to be okay. Right. They just go into this like sympathy. No, we don't need that during these times, and maybe there's an element of that maybe you need, I'm not saying that, but where that true, when I'm speaking of help in reference to this leveling up episode today is like, look, we need help as far as, hey, here's the strategic steps. So I'm going through these tough times. And again, I've been through a fuck ton of these tough times, you guys, right? So when I'm going through these, I want to reach out to mentors, to friends, to people that I know that have experienced a shit ton of difficult times themselves, that have the highest probability of going through these difficult times themselves, or very difficult times, similar time that I've been through, so then that they can give me and hopefully, shortcut this process for me by giving me the steps on how to get out of this time and what to do. Right. So I don't need simply, it's going to be okay. Everything works out. I believe in you. Okay. How is that fucking helping me? I need somebody to sit there and say, all right, dude, here's step one. Here's the 10 steps that you need to take action on. You need to pull your head out of your ass. You need to go get this shit fucking done. Right? Do you need me to hold you accountable? Right? Or whatever. And maybe I don't need the accountability. Maybe you need the accountability. I don't know, but I need somebody that can give me those steps. I don't need enablers in here. I need people that can truly provide the help that I need. So this is what I mean by seeking help. Okay. So number 6 is to do whatever you must do to set your environment up so then that way you can execute on a daily basis. So like right now, you got to optimize on execution, you get out of this mess. You got into the mess, you got to get yourself out of the mess. So it's probably going to take more energy, it's probably going to take more execution, it's probably going to take more work hours, all of these things, but you got to set yourself up in an environment to go out there and execute and win on these things. So being hyper aware of, okay, what are things that are causing you to not execute? Like maybe for a while, you got to stop hanging out with certain friends. You got to, you're probably going to need to do that anyway. Your social life might need to take there's nothing wrong with going out there and having a social life. However, if you're in a position right now where you can't put food on the table for your family, you don't need to have a social life during those times. Like put your fucking priorities straight. And I've had to go through this, dude. Like this is me talking to myself. This isn't me, preaching at you guys. Like these are the self-talks I've had to give myself during these times. Like, I'm like, look, dude, you don't deserve to go out and have the fun right now. You don't deserve the luxuries of life. You don't deserve to watch the game, watch the movie, watch the entertainment. You got yourself and your family into a mess. Now you need to be responsible enough to take care of yourself and take care of your family and get yourself out of this damn mess. Like you don't deserve these other things. You need to be focused 7 days a week, whatever it takes, get this shit done, take care of it, right? And turn this situation around, if I really want to turn those situations around. But then also in addition to that, what are things that are making you feel bad about your situation? What are things that are making you not execute during these times? What are things like here? I'll give an example. So when the COVID lockdowns happened, this was out, but around that same time, like during the COVID lockdowns, right? I had, the real estate business catapulted and was booming. So that was doing good, but I've got multiple other businesses in other industries. And I had several other businesses of mine that were just getting destroyed. Right. So I had to stop the bleeding and I was going through a very challenging time. And I had a conversation with my wife and my kids. I'm like, hey, look, you guys aren't going to see me much for a while. Like I got to turn this thing around. I got to do what I got to do. I got to go back to 16-hour days, 7 days a week. I got to do what I got to do, to turn this thing around. Well, then from there, somebody had asked me, well, there's 2 things that happen. All of a sudden I see on social media that like these profile pictures are like these black images. Like I thought it was a glitch with social media. Like people's profile pictures were just because I don't ever watch the news typically, whatever. So I was like, what's going on there? And I asked somebody about it and they're like, oh, well, the George Floyd thing, sort of explain Black Lives Matter. I'm like, who's George Floyd? And they started explaining it to me. And I'm like, well, man, maybe I'm living too much in a bubble. Like maybe I'm living too much under a rock. Like I didn't know, so then I'm like, well, I didn't know the riots were starting to happen. I didn't know this stuff was taking place because I'd never watched that bullshit. Like I just have always, blocked that stuff out, or at least have for a lot of years. So then I started, watching more YouTube videos, watching YouTube videos about what was going on and the riots and the whole situation and trying to educate myself on there. Now, at the same time, right, I've got these businesses of mine that are just getting murdered, right? It's like with my supplement company. Well, people, when the shutdowns, the economy, all this stuff going on, like we had some people that are like, hey, we don't need to spend $70 or $80 on supplements, this month and whatever. So I had, certain businesses that were getting hammered. Well, at that same time, I started to realize that watching all of that news, it was putting me into a negative state. That negativity was impacting my performance. I had a different feeling in my gut. I wasn't so excited. It was like defeating me. It was like demoralizing me. I was like, man, like it just started messing with my head, all those things. And then I realized, okay, that's impacting my environment. What's most important right now? Like I can't control those things. I can't control the riots. I can't control all these other things. What I can control though, is me turning my businesses around and taking care of my family. So I had to cut that out of my environment, at least during that time, because it was negatively impacting my overall execution, right? The other thing that during these times now, and I'm a believer in doing them in the first place, but during these hard times, something that I even do, like I amplify them up that much more, is affirmations. I know affirmations sound woo-woo. I used to think they were bullshit myself and used to not be a big fan of them until, sorry, I had to take a swig there, until I started to discover the overall power in them in my own life. Affirmations is a form of really self-hypnotism. If you get up every single day and you're telling yourself, man, whatever they are, whatever you need to experience, if I keep telling myself every single day that, like I am successful, I am powerful, I am a great leader, I am a great husband, I am a great follower, I am inspirational, I am inspired, I'm motivational, I am motivated, right? If I'm telling myself that each and every single day, all throughout the day, over and over and over, you start to self-hypnotize yourself into believing that stuff. So I have different affirmations I go through each and every day, and typically they're the same each and every day that I go through. But then when I start having negative self-talk, or I'm starting to get like, look, we have the world's already rigged against us, if you will. Like our mind needs to not be against us. Our mind needs to be with us and for us. So when you're going through these tough times, it's easy for your mind to start talking to yourself like, oh man, you're such a loser. I'm such a fucking loser. I'm such an idiot. Why did I do this? Why did I get myself in this position? I'm such a piece of shit. Right? Like maybe you don't have those thoughts, but those are, thoughts that go through my head during those tough times. I need to counteract those. Right. So I start counteracting those with, man, I am successful. It's like when I lost everything and got myself $100,000 credit card debt. It's like, look, dude, I'd already, years before that, I already was making, $1 million a year. I looked at and I started writing down all the different areas of my life that I created success. Well, hey, man, I overcame obesity. I used to almost be 300 pounds. I lost over 100 pounds. Okay, I've created success there. Here's other, I just wrote out a laundry list. Actually, it wasn't a laundry list. It wasn't, super long, but all the areas that I've proven to myself that I'm successful in the past. And I started focusing on those and doing daily affirmations of, hey, I am successful. I am a great leader. I am a great realtor. I'm a great entrepreneur. I'm a great father. I'm a great husband. I'm these different things. And I repeat those, all throughout the day, dozens and dozens of times throughout the day, and it turns that self-talk around, because whatever those thoughts are internally that taking place, think and Grow Rich, right? There's a reason why that book is titled that. So I found those to be helpful. Another thing that was really helpful for me in my environment, during that specific time, the example that I gave where I put myself in $100,000 of credit card debt. There's two books, and this is just an example. I'm not saying to go read these two. Well, I'm not recommending read the two books, but I'm not saying that like these two books were going to help anybody in any situation. They were what helped me during this specific situation. I'm using these as an example. So there are two books that I found. Nothing to Lose, Everything to Gain by Ryan Blair. So Nothing to Lose, Everything to Gain by Ryan Blair. And then Elon Musk by Ashley Vance. And the reason why these two books, now I just had these, I got the audiobooks and I had them on repeat for like a year, right? So each of those books, man, listened to 30, 40 times. I wasn't counting. It was just all I listened to was those two books on repeat. I'd listen to one, then switch to the other, then back to the one, back to the other, over and over and over for about a whole year period of my life. Why did I do that? Because it controlled my environment, controlled my mind, controlled my environment, gave me inspiration. These are essentially two stories about two extremely successful people that lost everything, way more than I lost. Their situations were way more dire, way more intense, way more stressful, and it showed how they rebuilt and how they got through those times. If you look at like Elon Musk as an example, breaks down, okay, how he sold PayPal, got his couple $100 million, sunk every single cent into SpaceX and Tesla. Everybody, bet against him, told me he was an idiot for doing that. We started to experience difficult times. His wife leaves him, takes the kids, loses his house. He's sleeping like on his buddy's couch. They're getting ready to BK, Tesla. Chain up the doors, and at the last minute, somebody, funding came in and kind of helped bail out the situation and allowed it to eventually become what it is today. But again, this is a guy a couple years before was worth several hundred million, lost everything, and not only lost everything from a financial standpoint, loses his house, right? Loses his wife takes the kids, and I'm like, well, hey, man, I still have a business that's operational. I still have an amazing wife that supports me. I still got amazing kids. I still got my dogs. I still got I started then it just made me feel better about my situation. Yeah, right. Not only did it make me feel better about my situation because these two guys' situations were much more extreme. They've lost much more. So the height to the bottom was much more, but then they rebuilt back up. So it also gave me tons of inspiration that I could build this, I could do this as well. Right. So it helped me get out of that kind of defeat element that I was in. All right. So number 7, the last step here, as you turn and are turning around your situation, right? As we're going through this, you're executing, you're turning your situation around. And I talked about this earlier, but this is part 7 of the step now, because now that the situation is turned around, make sure that you have the systems and processes. You got those things in place then to ensure that this doesn't repeat itself again. Because again, a mistake that I made earlier on, in my life was I kept repeating the same mistakes over and over and over. So it's like I'd get myself in this bad position, be out of it for a couple of years. Then all of a sudden I'd be in the same position. I'm like, what the hell, dude? Right? While skipping the 7th step here, I wasn't doing this, so making sure now that you're out of this and now you got the momentum back and things are flowing again, whatever, make sure that you got the systems and processes in place to ensure that stuff never happens. Put up those guardrails to ensure that stuff doesn't happen. So you don't veer off. Right? Like you start to veer off, boom, you got that guardrail. It's like playing bumper bowling, right? Like you got that guardrail that blocks you from veering off and getting yourself back into the same position. So make sure now that as you've reflected, as you've, gone through all of this, you've got those in place. And remember, talked about this earlier a lot, but we all go through these struggles. You're not alone here. And as well as like, these are a good thing. It doesn't feel like it as we are going through it, but as I reflect back on my career, or like, when I'm getting, I don't know, being a guest on stage somewhere, speaking, whatever, and they'll share my awards, accolades, and so forth. And as a reflect on my career, it's not the awards and accolades that I'm proud of, man. It's all the adversity that I've been able to overcome that I'm proud of. And here's the cool part about this is you overcome this adversity. It ends up giving you that much more self-confidence, that much more self-worth, not from an egotistical standpoint of thinking that you're untouchable or whatever, but it's like, look, I understand that I'm going to have a lot of problems that hit me in the future, but every time that you faced with a big problem or a minor problem, doesn't matter, minor, big, whatever, but you're faced with a problem, right? You're able to push through that, overcome that adversity, learn, grow, expand from it. Then you get another problem, you push through it, go through these 7 different steps that we just went through here today. You overcome it, each time gives you that much more confidence in yourself of, hey, look, man, I don't know it all. I'm going to have problems that I face in the future, but I have that much more confidence that I'm going to continue pushing through and be able to then get through any challenge that this, universe, business, God throws at me. I'm going to be able to push through those regardless. And as I mentioned earlier, you guys, pain and power come from the same place, man. When you're, I heard on a podcast the other day, I can't remember who said it, but it was a good point. The dude was like, hey, man, when we're succeeding, when you succeed, you party. When you fail, you ponder. And power happens in that ponder, that reflection, that like when you're succeeding and you got all that momentum, we're not, those times are great, but I've found, man, when we're getting our ass beat, that's where those true leaps of successful times, come from. With that. So don't look at these as necessarily as a negative. Again, I'll remind you of, Napoleon Hill saying that I stated earlier, that your level of success that you experience will be in direct proportion to the number and amount of temporary defeats that you experience. Right. So the more success you want to create, you just got to be prepared and understand the more temporary defeats that you are going to have to push through. But the cool part is when we have a 7-step process like I gave you here today, and you can steal it, take it, tweak it, make it your own, or tweak it and add things to it. These are just what works for me of all the I'm the king of fucking problems, man. I've had my share, right? And this is just what I've engineered for what's effective, for me. But just understanding that you're going to have a bunch of these going through we're not in a problem-free life. But it also becomes a blessing because a lot of people will just quit, like most people, once they experience a couple failures, they peace out. Once they experience a couple temporary defeats, they peace out. Very few will continue pushing through these, and it just makes it that much easier to succeed, if you're committed and willing to continue to pushing through these. So just remember, you 100% got this. I hope that you found this helpful. Again, a quick reminder, go check out gsdmode.com. Go sign up for the free 3-hour in-depth online masterclass. Again, it's free, no strings attached. It's all around right now the 6 fundamentals that I've learned to operate my entire real estate business on, that allows you to continue to grow, scale, and expand regardless of the marketplace. So it doesn't matter if it's a boom, bust, crash. Like we're coming amongst very difficult economic times right now, and we're in the beginning stages of this. I truly believe that we're going to go into a deep, long global recession, if not a global depression. I believe that the housing market is going to be hit harder than a lot of people are planning for and anticipating. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but from everything I'm seeing right now, hope for the best, plan for the worst. I see this thing getting ugly. So this is me just breaking down exactly what to do and what I've done over my 18 years of doing this, and how I got through the great financial crisis, the worst housing market in recorded history during 2008. So I break down, how I shifted from traditional business into REO, into short sales, into hedge funds, back to traditional, and continued, all throughout that time to go out there, not just survive, but thrive and kick ass in my business during that time. So it's a breakdown of that. So go jump into that training, check out that free ebook as well. And like I mentioned, if you go to the coaching tab, you can learn about my coaching and mentorship program, but also on there, you can schedule a one-on-one strategy discovery call with me, zero pressure on those calls. And we'll go through and I'll spend about 15 minutes telling you about what the program is. The rest of the time, so the other, 30, 45 minutes, we'll just talk about your business, what your current obstacles are, what your goals are. And I'll give you, so even if you don't join in my coaching program, it will be of value to you. So just think of it as a free coaching call. So anyway, hope you guys found this helpful. Keep crushing, keep kicking ass, and I will see you next time. Peace.